Good afternoon and welcome to the Family Business Show. I'm John Broons and today I have with me a special guest, Darren Squance from Willespie Wines. Initially I'd like to acknowledge Tech, the Executive Connection, our sponsors for today's show. Thank you very much Tech, CEO organisation, for peer mentoring, and Tech is all about making you a better leader. So Darren, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
It's a pleasure. Now for the people out there that want to know a little bit about Darren, can you give us a little bit about you and the family business that you're connected with?
Yes, well, my family started a winery called Willespie Wines in 1976, or my mum and dad did, to be more precise. I grew up on the farm, so I worked in the vineyard and picked and pruned and all the other bits and pieces that go with running a winery. Then I came up to Perth to go to university because they didn't have any universities down there at that point. So I had to come up here to do my Bachelor of Business degree, and I became a qualified accountant. And after that, I basically fell into an IT role, which basically gels with my accountancy and my finance background. So I work with financial and accounting systems up in Perth. And in the last 3 years, we took over the running of the winery, myself and my 3 sisters from my mum and dad, who retired, but still live on the property. But they basically have hands off now, so we run the winery ourselves.
Okay, so it's family owned and operated.
Yep.
Do mum and dad still own the business, or just the property?
No, the transfer we did when we took over, so it's been transferred into another legal entity.
Okay, so today Willespie Wines, you make a selection of fine wines down in the Margaret River region.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the winery?
Well, the winery itself was built in 1984. Being Margaret River, our flagship red wine is a Cabernet Sauvignon, which is typical of the Margaret River region. We make a lot of different reds, we make a lot of different whites, so we have a wide variety of wines, and we have a lot of customers who have been basically buying Willespie wine for the last 35 years. Our first vintage was 1982, so it's been around for a long time, and we have a lot of people who keep coming back, and also generations. So we have mum and dad who came and bought off us, and then their kids have come back, and now we're getting to the point where you get to the next generation as well. So it's got a very firm following. It's not a hugely known brand in Perth. We had basically a big presence about 15 or 16 years ago. That's when mum and dad were fully in the business and running it themselves. Then mum got ill, and the sort of impetus behind the business kind of dropped away a bit, and we sort of ended up basically with a cellar door, which we still have in Willespie. So the business needs a bit of a shot in the arm. So we took over 3 years ago, and we have basically started our own plan to get the name back up and running. Okay.
So size-wise, is it...
Small. We make about, if we crushed all the fruit and made it all into wine ourselves, we make about 9,000 cases. So it's not huge by any stretch. It's kind of a small enterprise.
Okay.
We've got about 33 acres of vines planted. It's about a 50-50 mix between red and white. Mm-hmm. And once again, that's something that's a bit fluid at the moment. We're sort of in the process of reevaluating what we've planted and what we've got, and where we're going to go in the future.
So you're now living the plan and you're looking at the strategies going forward?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So basically when we took over, we had some old historic connections that weren't necessarily a good fit for where we were thinking that Willespie needs to be and where it needs to go. So we kind of restructured the way the winery works and basically pulled it back to cellar door, and now we're expanding back out again. So we've now established an export market in China. We've got some in Hong Kong, and another finger in the pie in Malaysia, which is still a work in progress, and possibly Singapore as well. So we've actually expanded it now outside of cellar door. So cellar door, since we took over, has about doubled. So we've been quite happy with how that's going.
Okay. So, really, 3 years ago, you came into the business with your three sisters.
Yep.
What was the reason that you came in? You said your mother was ill, but that was a few years before that.
That was early 2000s when Mum got sick. But Mum and Dad now are both 79.
Okay.
So when we took over, they were both 75. And it was a case of they just couldn't do it anymore because Dad would still be out on the tractor. He'd still be pruning. They'd still be running vintage. Dad would still be in the winery. So they were still doing a lot of work, and Mum was still doing cellar door. So she was doing cellar door full time.
Was there no conversations up until
Not particularly.
the mid-70s about what's going on and how it's going to transpire?
I think maybe 15 years ago there was a brief discussion had about where things were heading, but there was never really any plan formulated to say, okay, at this point in time, this is what's going to happen, it's going to be handed over, and this and this is going to be put in place to, continue the business forward.
So you and your three sisters had never had any inkling that something was going to involve you coming back into the business?
I guess we all sort of would have had a thought in the back of our heads that at some point in time, something's going to have to give with the winery, because obviously Mum and Dad can't run it forever. But Mum and Dad also had it on the market, on and off, for quite a while. And they'd had several decent offers, but they'd never taken any of those offers, which sort of started to make me think, they don't want to sell this thing, so we need to sort of start having a look at, okay, how we're going to transition this. And that's when we sort of made the call to say, okay, look, Mum and Dad, you're 75. It's probably time for you to start thinking about moving it along. And that's when we sat down, actually had a proper discussion and got things rolling to actually to make the transfer happen.
You and your three sisters made the decision together? Did you have a conversation together?
Yeah, we had a conversation together. We would probably say out of the four of us, 2.5 were a yes.
Okay.
And 1.5 was a, not quite so sure.
All right, so it was a majority decision by the sounds of it.
Basically, yes, it just got over the line.
and would you call it an intervention?
To a degree, I would say yes, because Mum and Dad hadn't really made any plan themselves to make any of this happen. So we basically, it was a case of, well, they were getting to the point where you could just see it was not going to work for much longer and keep them healthy.
Okay.
So it was a case of, okay, we either go in and take it over, or we put it back on the market and we sell it. Now at that point in time, and probably still pretty much now, the market down there for real estate was not necessarily fantastic when it comes to vineyards. So you would have been looking at selling a vineyard which had been operational for 40 years at a sort of a break even. By the time you paid out all the debts and you cleaned everything up, they'd be basically walking away with nothing for 40 years worth of work, which didn't really make much sense to us. So we thought,
I can hear the financial.
yes,
sort of,
I sat down and had a look at it and thought, where this property is, because our property is in Willespie, and we're neighbours with Vass Felix, Cullens, Sounderford, Evans and Tate, Hayshed Hill, Woodlands is around the corner. All the big names in Margaret River, well, apart from Lewin Estate, which is down the other end there, are on our block. So we have got the best property that you could possibly have when it comes to producing premium wines and fruit in Margaret River. So when you look at it from that perspective, and we've blasted 40 years, which says, okay, we make a good product, because you don't last 40 years unless you do. Let's see what we can do with this thing and see if we can actually get it pulling its weight. And that was the thought behind it. Because at the end of the day, we've got nothing to lose, really, because we've still got the asset backing behind it. So if it doesn't work out and we end up selling the property, it will still cover its debts.
So you've got the background in business and finance.
Yep.
What about your siblings, the three sisters?
Yeah, well, so I've got three sisters. One of them's not really terribly much involved. She's got 4 kids, so she's got her hands full. My eldest sister, Tricia, she's very much into food and wine. So she's very much a wine aficionado. So she knows all of that stuff. And she's worked at Cellar Door on and off for 15, 20 years. So she's done a lot of work at the winery as well. My other sister, Jenny, she runs daycare centres. She's got 7, I think, now. Mm-hmm. So she's got a very savvy business brain as well. So she brings that to the story as well. And then there's obviously partners, my wife, Julie, Tricia's other half, Richard, who also, Richard's a builder, so he builds stuff. Julie's very good on the whole design, web-based type scenario stuff and emailing contacts and that kind of stuff, so she does all that as well. So between us, we've got pretty much all the skill sets you can need to run a winery.
You've got a great team.
Yeah, and then on the ground at the winery, we've got 2 part-time cellar door staff who share the 6 days a week during winter, 7 days a week during summer and spring, and also a full-time winemaker. So we've got basically all the bits are in place now.
Okay.
And we're still in the process of getting all of the plant, equipment, and the property back up to scratch, because there was a lot of repairs and maintenance we had to do when we took over.
Okay.
Because the buildings are like 35 years old. A lot of the equipment's getting a bit long in the tooth, so a lot of it need to be replaced or repaired or serviced, all that kind of stuff. And we're sort of getting towards the end of that tunnel now. So going forward, it's going to be better than what it was in the last 3 years. We've spent a lot of money doing things up.
Okay. Mum and Dad, do they come down and get involved still?
Oh yeah, Mum still pops down the cellar door, pokes her head in, and if we need anyone to fill in, Mum will quite happily walk down there and keep a hand in. Dad still gets on the tractor and drives around with the slasher on, cleans up all the weeds and stuff. So they're still hands on, which is also another consideration as well, because obviously if you've been working somewhere for 40 years and all of a sudden you don't have it, it's not necessarily a good thing.
Is it that you I suppose what I'm trying to ask here is how much does it involve you, and are you down there all the time, or are you in Perth and do you have another job, or is how does it work?
Well, for my input, basically what I do is I run things remotely from up here. So I basically do all of the books, all the accounts, and a lot of the planning type stuff. Very much at the very first couple of years, I was doing a lot of the back end type stuff as well. But I've got my own job up here. So the winery at the moment couldn't cover paying extra people. So at the end of the day, we're all, as siblings, are all doing what we do for nothing. So we're basically trying to get the business back up to where it needs to be before it'll actually start generating a profit.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've also, my background in IT, I've basically spent a lot of time going through, pulling out a lot of the old, well, we had lots of paper. So we had all these people who have come into contact with the winery over a period of 40 years, who basically would come in, they'd buy a case of wine and then they'd go, and that would be it. You would never see them again, or you would not know if you'd seen them again, because there was no way of sort of tracking who had come and who had gone. So I've been basically pulling apart a whole paper trail of 40 years worth of history, trying to recreate some sort of customer listing of what we've got. And that's yielded 3,000 or 4,000 people that have bought Willespie in the past, but have not necessarily then had any sort of further contact. Which I suppose in the whole, the information age, information is key to running any business. So if you've got your contact details, you've already sold people the wine, so you've done 90% of the work.
I think you've got my name somewhere.
Yeah, more than likely, yes. But basically, once you've got that contact, it's very important to then follow that up and keep contact with those people, because then they become part of the brand, part of the whole setup.
Okay, so it sounds fantastic. 40 years established. Mum and Dad are retired on the property. The 4 kids are involved in some lesser, to a lesser degree, some much more. Building the business back 3 years down the track, and we have a great little business operating that is pretty much ready to fly, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So it's basically the first 3 years, it was a case of just restructuring the business to basically bring it back to its core sales area, which was cellar door. Mm-hmm. We had a few bits and pieces out there that we were selling, like export and some over the eastern states, but on analysis and pulling apart the numbers, they weren't really doing the business as far as actually making money for the winery was concerned. So we pulled that back, and now that we've actually got cellar door back to kind of where it needs to be, it's not quite there yet, but it's certainly well along the road. We've now started to go back out to re-export, and also retail's not a major thought
Not part of the strategy.
My planning, no. But I mean, retail is great if you've got volume. Because we're small, we only do 9,000 cases a year. If we crushed everything, retail's not the best bang for your buck. It's good for a little bit of advertising, but the best is direct. Selling direct to your client base or direct through cellar door is certainly a much better option.
Okay. Have you thought about going into the Jimmy Watson Trophy?
Many years ago, we did. We probably haven't really exhibited wines for the last 10 years or so, but Willespie over the journey has had a lot of awards, but in the last 10 years or so, not a lot. So as part of the whole receding into the memory of people is because of that.
Yep.
But yes, that is something that's on the cards in the next couple of years. So when we took over, we have specifically made certain wines that are going to be the showpiece wines for exactly that sort of thing, and for putting forward for people like James Halliday and the who's who of wine, the wine industry in WA and Australia. So yes, it is in the pipeline.
That's fantastic. I think I'll take a quick break.
Yep.
And we will come back to Darren shortly. Just take a break and see you soon.